Welcome to DigitalK.
You probably see a lot of you actually using your phones right now, looking into things, that the chances are good that you're just using one of the services that DXC is providing. In case you don't know who DXC is and what we do, we're one of the largest IT service providers globally. We have about 100,000 people working out of more than 60 countries. We're probably one of the most hidden companies globally. In that respect, we have more than 1,000 people in Sofia. So what do? We provide business consulting, we provide IT consulting, we provide services, IT services, projects, programs, initiatives. We build those things that we just heard about, that we just saw. We build them, we operate them, and we would even obsolete them once they're required and replace them by something new. I'm a Chief Technology Officer, which is a wonderful title. So what in the world do I do, right? Technology is cool, we all do technology. A Chief Technology Officer is not so much about being the best coder, being the best technologist. It's all about understanding where to apply technology. So what in the world do you do in terms of technology? Where do you use it? And in order to know where do you use it, you have to understand what problem you're trying to solve. Well, the problems will lead you to knowing about your customer, knowing about your business. So why do you need technology? What do you want to do with that? And then you're starting to go into trends. Okay, understanding the business how it is now, understanding the business how it will be tomorrow. That's the core job of people like technology officers. You might or might not believe it. So I want to share with you a little bit about how do you actually utilize the trends? How do you use the trends and know them better than anyone else to actually find the sweet spot in the market where you can survive, where you can build your business? And I'm trying to give you a little bit of, a structure, a plan, a concept of doing that, and by that I also show off how we in DXC Technology are working nowadays. Now let's look at Bulgaria. So I know that we have a lot of you being in the financial and business areas, so I just had a check on what was happening, what was in the press here during the last couple of months and in the banking area. And what do I find are typically things that have to do with purchasing of banks, with takeover of banks, with mergers of banks. So Société Générale was bought. Let's look at what else is there. Investment bank buys Victoria. Okay, so there is something happening here. Postbank buys Piraeus, and here we know the price. So what is really behind that? I understand now there is something in the market, but how do I digest it? How do I go deeper? So looking at the business trends in the banking area, we have four things that happen. The first one is what the companies are doing. They're releasing their non-core assets. So companies are coming in and say, yeah, I don't need that part anymore. It's in a country that I don't really care about. Others are staying old school. They're not agile enough to actually innovate. But what they do is they grow by acquiring market share. And then they optimize. Their core asset is to be able to optimize and remove the duplication and provide the services at a lower price. And of course, that is not only a case for banking, it's also in a lot of other industries. The certain thing that people do is they actually start to invest into digitization. And I hope that all of you do that. You have in your groups and your companies and your organizations, no matter how big or how small you are, you have to have a plan how you reinvent your existing services, how you do the incremental improvement on the things that you do, how you change your people's mindsets, management of change, how you change your processes, how you change your products, how you change how you interact with the customers. We saw a lot about that in the trends that we had before. But the fourth one, and that is the one that I really want to focus in on, is how in the world do you drastically reinvent your business? So a lot of companies would love to do that. I mean, we have some of the most interesting examples in Kodak, for example. I don't want to pick point on anyone, but they were some 20, 30 years ago in that situation where, the classical film business was absolutely obvious to die soon. So no problem, but they had to reinvent themselves. And they tried it and tried it. So what are those companies? What are you facing if you try to do that? And I have a very simple diagram for you that you might want to take home and think about. So you look at performance and you look at performance over time. So your current business is the blue line. You know that you want to grow, you have an average, you have a moderate growth path, and you really want to take your business there. And your plans and your efforts are there to improve over time, to do these little baby steps, to do follow all the standard trends, and then someone will come and do it drastically different. We just heard about Uber, a taxi company that doesn't own any taxis. We have hotel companies that don't own any hotels. We have banks that own no bank assets, and they come in a niche, in a very small niche, with a horrible service experience, and they're not at all risking your baseline, right? But they're there. And it's not one, it's 10, it's 50, it's hundreds. And you might see them, but you don't really care. Why would you? But the risk is growing, and if you go further on, a few of them will make it. So from 1 to 2, at a certain point of time, their market appreciation might actually be higher than yours. You still have a lot of the old business, but the market appreciation is moving away from you to them. And at that time, if that happens, you're almost lost. So it shouldn't go that far that you say now in 3, folks, they have a much better service, they have a much better market appreciation. You have the old customers, your old style, and then you are in a problem situation. So how to avoid that and how to reinvent your business model yourself, that's one of the things that companies are doing. And I'm coming from Germany, so one of the big things that people are doing is they are trying to reinvent into autonomous cars, they're trying to have electrical cars, and a big thing is happening now. Let's look at BMW. BMW, for example, announced their first ever loss, quarterly loss. Why did they do that? Because they decided to invest €1 billion into research. Not knowing exactly what the research is, they just put a big pot of money there and say, we have to change our company. I realized something happening. There are all the Chinese companies out there for electronics. We have the autonomous driving companies. Google has better autonomous driving cars than us, so we better get up there and invest big time as long as we still have the money. So the next big question is how to reinvent. So what do you do in order to reinvent? And I think the first thing that you have to realize that there is that breakpoint, like I said. The new next better service is not the improved service that you had before. So if you look at, 100 years ago, the fastest way to walk around, or 120 years ago, to get around was by horse-drawn carriage. You can optimize the hell out of that, but you won't ever be faster than what you have on the other upper picture. You have the fastest car on the smoothest track with a very lightweight rider and almost nothing that is like a horse-drawn carriage. And still you don't get above 70 or 80 kilometers per hour. So you needed at that point of time a very drastic change, a new idea. And imagine how the first cars look like. They're really horrible, and no one wanted to have them. And they were smelling, they were stinking, you couldn't get gas anywhere. So they were completely inadequate to compete. And of course, that's all history. And we have to think about ourselves, what's the next thing? So if I move the car up, what's the next thing that will be replacing those cars that we have nowadays? And if you find that out, then you have a business. You're up there, right? Another thought on how to reinvent, and those are just snippets. You have to find your own ones. I just give you, a few that you might not have thought about, and your task afterwards is to think about yours. But just the thought is to really identify your core asset. Again, about cars. I like cars. There is this wonderful car manufacturer who can build fancy cars. They can build them in masses, in volumes. They have the best designers. Well, and they're not really having a good, flourishing business anymore. Something's wrong. So what is their key asset? And at that point of time, and that's your task as well, go back and try to identify what really is taking you ahead of the competition. And it might be something that you do not expect. So for example, in the case of a very well-known car manufacturer, they did that, and they realized that one of their key assets is to actually put people into a very narrow, confined space. So I can put 4 people into a space for 10 hours, and they will stay there, they will be comfortable, they will be happy. That's actually a key asset on how to do that. And I can use it in quite a lot of different places. But it doesn't have anything to do with cars. Once you understand your core asset, then you can come back with new business ideas, look at the market, look at the competition, and completely change what you're doing. But for changing that, you need something very simple. I call that handrails and guidelines. And I just want to give you a few examples here as well. And of course, it's just some examples that we use here because they're really nice. You need to find your own handrails and guidelines. The first one is very simple. Brand value is decreasing. And I'm not only talking about the big public known brands that invest big time into marketing, it is everywhere. I would assume that in a couple of years we will almost not talk about brands at all. There might be a few that stand out. Why is that so? Because of the way that we consume information. Right? If you want to buy something, you go to the internet, you essentially Google it, you look into what other people said about the product, and even if you didn't ever hear about that product, you believe them. You believe them much more on a hotel platform, on a social media platform, or whatever, and you would possibly buy something that has nothing to do with brand. That is a risk for the big companies and the big brand owners, but it's also an opportunity for you because you can just launch a new brand very easily, and all of the startups that we're looking at here are doing exactly that and utilizing that. For them, it's better than ever before. It's much easier to market. Another handrail and guideline that might be really, really interesting for you is just to think beyond the next step. So what we tend to do is, I need to have market presence. I need to buy a web shop, a web presence. I need to buy some interaction in applications in Facebook with my users, with my customers. Is it really that? Wait for a second, think about it. What people really did that were successful, they didn't build an offer, they built an ecosystem. They built a platform. A platform for something where everyone comes and joins you in doing it. So we had steel companies that wanted to sell steel, but they built a steel building platform. Why in the world would they do that rather than selling their steel? Now they have all the others come in. So they have all the market data, they own the data, they have insight into the data. At the first point of time, they have insight into the competition. What better sweet spot do you want to be at? But platform is not only just a web shop. Just think of platform as being anything where you build an ecosystem of people who work on your behalf, essentially do your work. In classical coding, it's kind of the SDK that you had, but expand that ecosystem to your business and think about where you want to be. You want to be at the head, you don't want to be a user in that respect. And just the last third handrail, and there are tons and tons of them more, look at your data and decide on what data you really need. What is the sweet spot of the data you need? We often say data should be a lake and shouldn't be a swamp. Let's look at how you got here. You probably use something like Google Maps. They have traffic information in there, how crowded the streets are. What is the lifespan of that information? A minute? 2 minutes? Do you need the data afterwards anymore? What is the value of that data after 2 minutes, maybe after 5 minutes, after a day? It's almost nothing. Do you want to keep that data? Do you want to throw it away? So for your developers, for your people who do the business decision, you have to tell them guidelines about the usage and collection of data, because data is right now much more than compute driving the cost. So how much do you aggregate? How long do you keep it? And we were always talking about data retention of days or months. We had some customers who spent hundreds of millions of dollars on building a big data lake, hired 100 analysts afterwards, data analysts, and came back and said, we couldn't find the value in your data, or in our data. Well, you never do it that way, right? The way you find value in data is that you understand your business challenge, you understand your business problem, you build your proposition in the market, you build your processes behind that, you have the data, you own the data, and you change it flexibly if it's not successful until you either scrap it or you just increase it in size. If you're at that level, then the next step that you have to do is understand your next level of detail. For example, in banks, you really go down each of the trends that you have. So for you, that is hard work. You have to go to all the different analyst firms, you have to go all the different topics. And I just brought one on banking, and I admit it's not, the very, very, very latest ones. But just to pick on a few on, right? Right now, the rise of the non-traditional players, bottom left. If you look at that, right now, everyone can open a bank almost. You need a bit of money, you need capital, you can get that from capitalists. All the services are available. We as a company would provide you with a central banking service. It's just paid by the transaction or whatever. You can get help desk services or call center services. You can have everything that you want for that. Put it together for your particular business model, build a niche and go to market. That is something that wasn't possible 5 or 10 years ago as easily. And I tell you, every year it becomes easier, and every year there will be more of those. But it's not only that one trend. It's key. The key message is you have to identify all those 10, 20, 30 trends that will impact your current business, but also the one that you're going for. So is there a market still with what you're trying to achieve with your new business models, knowing those trends? So you really have to go down that line. And that's what we do with our customers. That's where we help them to identify. And what comes out of that is even more complex. It's an eye chart, right? I just want to show that to you because that is like our blueprint on what we say, hey, banking, let's look at that. So what are the impact of the trends into the banking industry? So you can take something like that, and that's where we help with workshops, with talks, with building the projects, the capabilities behind that, and look at each of the 5 areas. You know, what is the new startup business? What is the new customer experience? How do people pay? What are the changes in regulatory requirements? And by the way, internally, how do you manage and steer that? Do you do it yourself? Do you give it to someone else? Do you buy it from the market? And it's not one thing on each of these areas. It's tons of items that you possibly need to do to drive your business, in this case, example is a bank, to the future. And you will not have all of these as projects, right? You will have your 5, 10, 15 of those, and you have to select wisely which ones you do, apply design thinking for that respect, do proper management, and that's where essentially, if you have this methodology top-down, I think you can steer your company based on the trends, and you know exactly where to go and what to do and what items to use in that respect. So just a little bit about us as a company. In Bulgaria, we have an agile innovation, a digital transformation center here. We operate and provide services for all over the world from Bulgaria. We have technology drivers and entrepreneurs here on our side. We develop minimal viable products, proofs of concepts. We help companies, middle-sized and large companies, to really drive through this ecosystem and help them to build their own offshore, nearshore delivery centers, to have people be built in agile factories, in agile teams, to educate their own staff, to actually drive their business forward. And we don't do that with the IT organizations, we do that with the business. Because that's where the budget is, that's where all the companies right now spend their money. The digitization is nothing else than threatening the core business with a digital means and with a digital style. One more slide, if you're really interested in trends. DXC also has a trending research organization. It's called the Leading Edge Forum. So take a picture of the QR code. Now you can take out your mobile phones. Take a picture of that. It will lead you to not only this set of trends, but also to quite a number of other interesting pieces of information on trends that you can use then to build on things. So things like I said here, enterprise go after the digital business moonshots. That's actually what you see in what I just said. BMW put $1 billion aside, but it's not only for those big ones, right? It's those companies that realize on that curve, they're getting below that line where they actually are competitive.